Hi, Suzanne here from the Project Manager Clinic, and I'm really excited again to have another Ask the Mentor session with Margaret Dos Santos. And we've got a really curly one again today, haven't we, Margaret? We
That's
always seem
right.
to have them, but
Love those
today
curly questions.
it's a really curly one this time, and we've already got somebody online. Edwina, thanks for joining us. Again, this is recorded and it will go onto the YouTube channel, which is the Project Manager Clinic, and there'll be details of that in the description down below. And if you like what we're doing, please subscribe, give us a thumbs up, make some comments. That would be great. So, Margaret, how are you?
I am very well and super excited about today's topic. I was so excited to be asked to mentor this question because it's dear to my heart and I have dealt with this topic for many years.
Yes, and look, a lot of us do this anyway in project management land. We're
Mm.
often managing people that are remote or isolated or whatever it is. But managing the hybrid team is now more of a thing that's understood, not just for projects. So we've got a little bit of a presentation here. So I'll just get it going. Margaret, you'll have to tell me when you want things moved. But as I said, it's the new normal. Managing your team across locations, remote workers, all of those things. It can be demanding. And our question this month is, how do I manage a hybrid team effectively? Will I be judged as a project manager for the success or otherwise of my hybrid management ability? And what tools can I harness to make this a positive experience for the team? So tricky.
It is tricky, but it can be untangled and
It can be
answered
untangled.
very well.
Yep. So okay, so we're off. And we sort of alluded a little bit to what we mean by hybrid teams, but we need to understand the challenges. And some of those challenges are not just ours as project managers, they are challenges for organisations, communication barriers, building trust and connection, all of these things we're going to talk about during the session. Fostering collaboration and engagement, pretty important, and some tools and strategies for the effective management of hybrid teams, leveraging technology, creating a culture of transparency, and cultivating a sense of belonging, which when you read this stuff on the surface sounds like something that should happen anyway. Doesn't
That's
always.
right. That's right. And the reason why I think hybrid has come about, I think it's kind of been exponential since COVID. But to
Mm,
be honest, I working for global companies, I was already managing hybrid teams from a global perspective because the teams were all dispersed, they were not co-located, and therefore hybrid for me has been a long time, you know, activity of mine. It's not just been because of COVID and as a result of COVID. And hybrid just means that you're not co-located. It can be you can be in another state, you can be working from home, you can be overseas. So it just means you're not in the same place as your team.
as your team. And I don't know whether or not you agree with this, Margaret, but I know in the mix of teams that I've sometimes used, people are not working full time either. So they're working part of the week.
That's true. And if they don't have the days that they're working on their footer of their
Yeah.
emails, it's hard to know then whether they're sick, whether they are working, whether they're on holidays. So it's good to actually, have that as a standard footer note to say that you only work certain days of the week.
Yeah, exactly. Well, hopefully, we'll get back to that a little bit too as we go through because it can be a bit interesting that too. Edwin, I know you've got your mic off, and you don't have to answer me. You can write in the chat. But if there's anything that you would like to specifically talk about, or for us to talk about, just let me know, or put your hand up, or write it in the chat. That would be great.
Will do.
Okay, Margaret.
Okay, so it is important to basically engage everyone, you know, in the room if you've got a meeting or if you've got a project team that you're managing. So it's important to basically have communication as an understanding of everyone. And if it's a hybrid team, then basically working through that is quite tricky. Basically, we'll talk about it later, but trying to get people in the right time because they might be in different time zones.
Yeah.
Basically setting the if it's a meeting set up, setting the agenda, making sure that everyone's on the same page, and basically dealing with cultures. So it is important. And when you're working with hybrid teams, especially if you don't have your camera on or if you don't have, for example, you're not co-located, so you can't actually see the expressions of people. A lot can be said by the cues of what people are doing, what they're not saying, just by their facial expressions and how they're reacting. So, that is all part of communication. It's the visual cues, not just
Yeah.
what is said and what is not said.
Yeah, it's pretty powerful, isn't it?
Mm.
The being able to see people. I did a thing about this many, many years ago, well before we thought about working from home and hybrid teams. And I had a workshop and I had all the people sitting out the front, like in the classroom setting, and then there was a big whiteboard. And then I went behind the whiteboard, turned my back on them and started talking and doing stuff. Well, because they didn't understand exactly what I was doing. So it was like a demonstration. Without seeing me, there was a lot that was lost in it. And that's what we're talking about a little bit with this too. Without the visualization or without some framework of how we're going to operate and communicate, a lot of things can be lost. So I think we're sort of talking here about redesign meetings and meeting spaces to better serve the hybrid team, whatever that might mean.
That's right. And it's important if you have, for example, a hybrid team and you're setting up hybrid meetings, that everyone in the room that's co-located is just as important as everyone that's online. And sometimes people forget that and they're, addressing people at the table physically on face to face, but, the people that are, zoomed in or on Teams chat, on Teams meetings, have basically been forgotten or disregarded
Yeah.
because you're right, it needs to be visible. The person, and that's why it's
Yep.
important
Yep.
to have that visibility for so many reasons, so that they're not forgotten,
Yep.
the communication, the cues, and things like that.
And so many times I've been online because, I don't like going into the office. I've been online and it's a big meeting, a big room of people, and somebody's talking, and I have no clue who's talking because I can't see them clearly enough. So I've always said to people on my projects, before you speak, always say, Suzanne here, and blah, blah, blah. And I know it seems tiresome if you're in the room, but if you're not in the room and you're sitting up the end where the camera doesn't hit you, people don't know. And there's sometimes 4 or 5 people sitting up that end and you've got no clue who's talking.
That's actually a good point, because if you've got a question or you want to follow up with that person after the meeting, then you want to
Yep.
know who has actually spoken so that you can actually continue on that communication thread if it's, offline.
If it's offline, because otherwise what I tend to do is I'm in the chat saying, who was that? Who was
Yeah,
that talking?
yeah, that's right. Who
Which
was that?
makes me feel like I'm a bit inadequate, because I don't recognise everybody's voice. Well, of course I wouldn't,
That's right.
you know.
Yeah.
So we started with a little bit of a tip for the meetings. What else can we do, Margaret?
So the first thing I would do as a project manager is, if you're setting up meetings for the team, I would set up regular meetings and understand the cadence, if it's weekly, fortnightly, monthly, and basically have those set up in your diary, and so that people have the expectation that it's at certain time of the certain day of the week, and they know that, hey, that time and that day is the time for this meeting and the time for it to get together for this particular project. And once you've actually obtained that cadence from everybody and understand that, it things just flow so easily. And if someone, for example, forgets to accept a meeting and they've already attended 2 or 3 and it's for some reason disappeared from the calendar, they know at this time on this day, that's the day and time for this particular project meeting. So it's actually a really good idea to continue and have it regular.
So is this like more consistency? So every Tuesday at 9 o'clock we have this sort of meeting, and every Thursday we have this sort of meeting at 3 o'clock. That sort of
That
thing.
that's right. That's right.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, good for people like me who are pretty hopeless with times and days, and yet I'm a project manager. Go figure. But anyway, okay. Um, Now, I put this one in, Margaret. Set up frequent individual online sessions with only the remote team members or people that aren't coming into the office all the time, because you might have coffee with people that you're in the office with all the time, but those people that are remote or even in another country, they're not really getting the same face-to-face time, if you like. They're not really getting that individual chat. And I know not everyone can talk to everybody on their team all the time, um, but I've found this to be really invaluable. And even certainly during COVID, I was managing a whole portfolio of projects and was in the office for 8 days before they sent us home on a brand new project. And we got to know each other throughout this project, even though we weren't meeting personally. So that was one of the little tips that I used.
That's actually a good idea. I have actually asked team members whether they do want to catch up one-on-one with me.
Yeah,
Some will say no, and they just say to me if they have an issue or they want to raise
yeah,
something with me, then they'll, let me know, and then I can set up a one-on-one with them. There might be an issue that they don't want to actually, brief the whole entire meeting or
yes,
everyone in the meeting, or it might be sensitive. And especially if they have family issues, sometimes they don't want other team members in the project team to know what's going on.
mm,
They might be struggling with something at home. There might be a death in the family, or something like that, where they they want to keep it private. They don't want everyone in the room to know what's going on.
mm. Yeah, exactly. And that sort of goes to that last point a bit. I know we've skipped over the camera, but we're going to talk about that in a second. It is important for us as project managers and managers to understand some of the challenges of working from home. I mean, I'm fortunate I've got everything all set up, all like ergonomic. It's actually more comfortable for me working from home. It's quiet. I don't have disruptions. Um, but not everybody has that. And also, not everybody finds working from home to be as easy as I do, because I'm an introvert and it works for me. But people like my youngest daughter, she's an extrovert. She found it very difficult through COVID because she didn't have her teammates there with her for that normal banter that people have in the office. So I think it's important that we understand all of that. And Margaret, if you can just touch on, before we go to the camera, touch on, is there any way, do you think, that we can tell, or we can pick these things up, some signs that people are maybe not coping, or there's an issue happening that we need to somehow see through the camera?
That's really interesting. So sometimes people will tell me themselves, and sometimes it's facial cues, or what they're doing, they're forgetting things. So
Right.
some of the things that they would typically be really spot on with, they're not sort of up to scratch. They look tired or something like that. So those sort of things, maybe you can tell from that
Yeah.
that, maybe they don't, enjoy working from home as much because, like you said, like your daughter who, wants to talk to other people. And as humans, community is actually really important because
Yeah.
that's how we're social creatures. So we, like to, chit chat, go for coffee with someone and basically divide and conquer our fears, our challenges, our issues, and that's one way of doing it. And it feels better. It's therapeutic. It's
Yeah.
like
You don't
getting
feel
something
quite
off your
as,
chest.
yeah, and you're not quite so alone, I guess. So if we just now talk a little bit about the camera on off, I think that's really an interesting thing that you're talking about because it's not often talked about, is it? So openly that people will say, well, this is my expectation of how it will work. So I'm just go to the next slide. And I know that's fairly small, but if you can talk a little bit about that in a bit more detail. And just before you do, I'll just remind people that these slides will be on the website once I've uploaded everything to YouTube. So the website is www.pmclinic.com.au. Go to the downloads and template section and you'll find all of these things there. Link will be in the description when it's uploaded to YouTube. So thanks, Margaret. If you can go through this, it'd be great.
So if we can go back to step one. So
Great.
yeah. So step one is, if you've got a hybrid team, and especially if it's dispersed all over the world, I find this meetingandDate.com URL very, very useful to schedule meetings, because if you know that someone is, for example, and I've got an example there, someone's in Sydney, someone's in New York, and someone's in London, and you want to set up a meeting between those three time zones, it is actually quite challenging. Those are probably three of the most difficult time zone to actually work with, because it's difficult to find a good compromise on any of those cities, especially if you're, meeting together at once. So I find that this URL is very helpful because all of the green shaded times and days for that particular meeting is, the best time to schedule the meeting for those three people. And I find this very useful for anyone in any city, anywhere in the world, especially if you want to schedule the time, because the green is the most, favourable, then yellow, and then red, and that's probably the order of how you would schedule a meeting. And I've used this everywhere, and in every country. Yeah, I mean for meeting for
Yeah.
different countries.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I've often heard people say, we always miss out because we have to get up at 4 o'clock in the morning and all of those sorts of things. But this, I guess, will help some of that, prevent some of that. I'll make sure that that URL's in the description as well so that people have got it.
Yeah. And one of the things that that's important as well is, like, when you're scheduling these times, make sure that people are aware that you'll be scheduling the time, and that it may be different days for some people. Like for Australia, it might be,
Right.
the morning of the next day, but for the US, it might be the evening of the previous day. So just so that they're aware that, different, that it may be different days and it may be different times.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course. Now, shall I move to the next one?
Yeah.
There we go.
So I think we spoke a little bit about this, and this is like to determine whether you have your camera on or off, and especially if there are people in the room that are co-located, that you want to make sure that everyone has an opportunity to speak. And communication, as I mentioned, is a lot about visual cues and also what is said and what is not said. So that's why it's important to, have a look at the visual cues. And sometimes, I mean, if the camera is off, you can't really tell what people's reactions are to certain topics, or whether they're listening or whether they're not listening. And so by having the camera on, it basically helps the person that's presenting as well to engage better, but also to understand that it's not boring, that they're not falling asleep, for example,
Yep,
that they're
yep.
actually, you know, really wanting to hear about the topic.
And we talked about this, well, alluded to this right at the start. It's not that we want to police people so much. We want to build an environment of trust. So, I mean, from my perspective in project management land, and also as head of a consulting company where everybody's out on site, you've got to have trust that your people are actually working. You've got to provide them with mechanisms where they can work remotely, where they can store their documents that can be shared. All of these things are now very accessible in the technology environments that we have now. They weren't always. So 20 years ago or so, it wasn't quite as easy, but you still had to um, have an environment of trust. I always made sure that my people felt that they could work with some autonomy, but there was still a framework that these were the basic expectations that we wanted for them. And you're talking about that here and now. I just wonder sometimes if people will respond positively to that, or if they'll feel that it's more of a intrusion into their life. But I guess after all, they are working. So, you know, you also talked about before communication can be expressed by physical cues. So if we can't see them, we don't know. But not every, we none of us all have our cameras on absolutely the entire time that we're online. Sometimes we might have to do something like I've coughing and things like that. So I'll turn it off. That's not what we're talking about though, is it, Margaret? When we're
No,
talking
it's not.
camera on off. Yeah.
No, it's not. And as I mentioned here, communications is very important, and part of that is actually looking at visual cues of what people's expressions are and whether they're interested or not. So you know that maybe if you're presenting and there's a particular topic where people look bored, then maybe that's not a topic to continue on talking about, and
Yeah.
maybe that you can go on to the next topic, for
Yeah, you can
example.
move on. Yeah.
And also, if they're not visible, as I mentioned, then it makes it difficult for people to include them in conversations, because usually if there are people co-located with you at the table, for example, you're more likely to say, has anyone got any questions at
True.
face to face at the
Yeah.
table. And quite often, if the people have got their cameras off, you don't know whether they've actually left the room and forgotten to leave the actual webinar or,
Yeah.
meeting, or whether they're actually listening and not saying anything.
So now just a question out of nowhere from me. Um, I'm just wondering if do we need to give people additional training for this? Do you think? And the reason I'm saying that is I've been on many meetings where I've got people, that are on the tech using the technology, so that they're on the remote webinar or Teams, whatever it is, and they don't say anything. Like, do you think that we need to train people to be able to say, look, it's me, Suzanne. I need that to be repeated. I didn't understand it. The whatever for whatever reason. It's me, Suzanne, and I'd like to put something forward. Do you think that people are comfortable generally with doing that, or is it something we need to be training people a bit on?
That's a good question. And I think if you're an introvert, you're more likely to just sit and listen and
Mm,
analyze and process information.
mm,
If you're an extrovert, then you've got no qualms about speaking up, talking, asking questions, putting your point of view across. But also, I think so it goes beyond just introverts and extroverts. I think it also then goes beyond that in terms of also cultures across
Right.
different countries.
True.
Some cultures, respect hierarchy, and they may then not feel like they want to speak up, and they feel like, you know, because of that, they are more quiet, and usually they have very valuable insights and great information to share. So if that's the case, and you are reading the room, checking everyone out, I would be asking if anyone that, and you're checking to see if everyone has spoken. If anyone hasn't spoken, I would be asking them
Mm.
if they will have any questions or if they have anything to say. And usually when they're asked, they then contribute. And so,
Which is, sorry, Margaret, but that's
yeah,
a very interesting thing because as project managers, we've not always been thought of as people managers. And what you're talking about is something that is quite well known and understood in a facilitation or when somebody's training, they will make sure that everybody in the room feels included. But as project managers, we're not necessarily like that.
that's true, but then that's how you get more insights and more information,
Yeah,
because if only two or three people out of 10 have spoken,
yeah,
and there's other seven others that may have comments, contributions, views, issues, it's not really a comprehensive viewpoint on everything, on everyone,
true.
with because you've
Mm,
only really obtained, one or two viewpoints.
yeah,
So that's something that, and that's when I first, became a project manager, one of the things was I had to observe every single person in the room, and that's what I taught others as well, to see
yeah.
what they were doing.
Now that's very interesting as well because I guess a lot of project managers think they're observing things, but I'm not sure that they're observing their people in the same way as maybe a skilled people manager is doing that. But as we've talked before on some of these Ask a Mentor sessions, project management's sort of changing a bit, and project managers are morphing and changing into, well, the understanding of them being more of a manager and a team manager. And if we go back to the question that we were asking in the first place, what was asked of us in the first place, as a project manager, am I going to be judged on the success or otherwise of this hybrid team? So it's really shifting the success of project management away from just the technical, I'm going to deliver this as the scope, to this question shifts it into, well, I've actually got a team I'm managing and we're managing the team to outcomes.
That's right. And a project manager wears different hats, and one of them is
Mm,
engagement, leadership, stakeholder engagement, you know, and so and they're a mentor. It's not just about the technical part of being a project manager.
yeah, yeah.
It's also the people side, the communication, and, all of those other, topics that I've just mentioned. So
And sorry, you talked about uh, the different cultures, keeping to the time on the agenda, and then I've just sort of flicked to the bottom of what you've got here, setting the agenda. They're using different methods of engagement. Now that's really interesting, Margaret.
that's right, because that actually assists the person that is actually chairing the meeting to find out whether people are engaged or not. And so
Yeah,
using visual cues like audio, or polls, asking them to like, or, send
yeah,
an effect, thumbs up or things like that,
yeah,
or, QR codes if they have a survey and they want the person to, fill in the survey, ask questions in the chats and things like that. And that way, it's a two-way communication.
yeah,
You've got the presenter that's presenting the topic, but you've also got feedback from the people that are in the room, even if it's hybrid,
yeah,
presenting back to the the team in the forum. So it might be Microsoft Teams, it might be Zoom. So whatever forum it is, you're able to then have that two-way communication.
Yeah. It is cool when people are doing the thumbs up and the waves and all of that sort of stuff. There's a lot of people, maybe 100 people on a town hall, and you can see all of this activity happening and people doing stuff. Now I'm going to throw something in that you probably no one's ever heard, but because was a professional actor, which you probably know, Margaret, years ago
Yes.
on
Yeah.
stage. I actually do some other funny things. So, because we've got people that look like they're on a TV set, to do the engagement part, I might say, okay, so Bernice, I now want you to introduce this in the style of a newsreader. So then Bernice has got to say, good evening, everyone. It's Bernice here, and we're going to be now talking about the technical solution that we've now done in Agile. And I'm going to now cross to so and so, who's the reporter. And you don't do it all the time, right? But it's a little bit of fun, but it helps people to do something different that they would maybe do if they were all standing around in the lunchroom or doing their agile stuff and they're all talking. If the meeting starts to go a little bit flat, there's a bunch of things that you can introduce that come from theatre sports, and that's one of them. It's acting in the style of, but I throw it out there, and people really respond very well.
That's very good. A tip. I might actually steal that tip because that actually allows, especially if you're short on time
Yeah,
and you need to get a message across and you don't actually need a two-way communication when you're training or when you're basically wanting feedback, you would use the two-way communication. But if it's a one-way, like a town hall, and
yeah,
you only want questions at the end, then you probably would read something or would actually announce something like a newsreader
yeah,
because you're actually giving them people information that they need to then take away.
yeah.
And yeah, it's not necessarily a learning
No.
activity.
And it's a bit of fun, people put on another voice, just like they are a newsreader. So it sort of breaks the monotony sometimes, particularly for the longer meetings where you're going to throw to this person and then throw to that person, come back and we're finished. So that sort of works. Can I move to the next slide, Margaret?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Oh, here we are. So this is just the summary of what we were talking about. Am I going to be judged? So you're saying, unfortunately.
That's right. Depends on which way you look at it. You
Yeah.
will be judged on how you manage the team in a hybrid way because it is a form of communication. And that is one of the knowledge areas of project management.
Mm,
So,
mm,
regardless of whether you think that it's just the technical side, it's not just the technical side. It's the people as well, the communication, the leadership, the management, the mentoring, the coaching. It's all of that. It's not just, how that you can actually manage the budget or you can
yeah.
manage the scope
Or
or
the
you can manage
schedule.
the schedule. It's all
Which we've
of
got
those
to do.
things, which
Yeah,
we've got
it's
to
all of
do,
those
but
things.
it's not
Yeah.
just that. It's about the people side. And interestingly enough, AI is going to automate a lot of that technical stuff. So more
Mm,
and more, the project manager is morphing into more of a communicator, engager,
yeah.
stakeholder, manager. So it's embracing that even more. It's changing the percentages of the project manager's time more
Mm,
into the people side.
mm, mm. And just to, you've got some of these things here, but just to summarize them, use the methods that you talked about in setting up the team meeting, manage the meeting in an active way by encouraging participation, which we talked about. Listen, ask questions of the attendees. Now, that's really important because That doesn't always happen. And we talked a little bit about that with some people shying away, or, I mean, sometimes I think it's a way of people hiding, um, not necessarily being shy, but a way of hiding. Take notes, and if using AI to record, obtain the attendees' permission. Now, just talk a little bit about that one, Margaret.
I think some people may feel a bit that it's being intrusive. If, for example, AI is recording their conversation, or they may not want that to be
Yeah,
recorded. So you always ask for permission
yeah,
before the meeting
absolutely.
starts.
Absolutely. And just remembering for people, subscribe to the channel, hit the button down below, give us a thumbs up. We love bringing you these things, don't we, Margaret?
We do. It's so much fun.
It's fun, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think we should have a session on the theatre stuff separately, and we'll maybe do some practice on that. But
Yes.
for people that don't know myself and Margaret, this is a little bit about Margaret. She's had a huge amount of experience. Working hybrid, as she said, has been part of her career. So that's why we're talking to you all today. And of course, I've had my own consulting company and been a program director now for a long time. So you learn some tricks of the trade, don't you, Margaret? I think.
That's right. And just if you use some of those tips that I mentioned, the regular cadence, using the meeting and you know,
Yeah,
date.com, and basically, you know, having cameras on, looking at visual cues, getting people to basically participate in the meeting, ask questions, listen.
yeah.
That is a huge important part of good communication, is to listen.
Is to listen, and so often doesn't happen.
I
But
know.
yes, and that is part of now project managers really maturing and coming into um, that management part of the project management. Like I say, always say, project management, it's two words. One of the most important parts is the management part. Now, just asking people that are online with us if there's anything else that they would like to add or to for us to talk about before we just go to the next slide, which is what happens if they stop responding. This is an interesting one, isn't it? So look, if anyone wants to say anything, just put your hand up and I'll just keep watching the chat. Um, Now, Margaret, have you had experience of this when people stop responding? You don't know what's going on with them? They're remote?
Well, I have had that, and sometimes it's because they've got technical difficulties,
True.
and
Yeah.
maybe the network bandwidth is not great, and so and then you see them drop off, and you just think, oh, that must have been like a technical issue.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have to be honest, I don't think I've had people where they have just turned about face and just walked off and not, want to participate. Generally, people do want to participate in projects and project meetings. I mean, but there is the odd person where they may be trying to sabotage the project.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for personal reasons, it might be for self-preservation. They may be a person that's a result of the project going live, they're going to be made redundant.
True.
So, so they then withhold information, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah.
I think that
Tricky.
that is very tricky. So I think I have experienced that. It hasn't been through a hybrid method. It was actually face
Yeah.
to face, but you still need to deal with that.
And we've talked about this quite a number of times in the Ask a Mentor sessions that project managers have to do things. They can't shy away. That's part of being a project manager. They have to escalate. They have to raise it as a risk. Whatever they have to do, they have to do it. Because if they don't, things often don't get any better. I've I've not specifically had a person on a project I've been managing not responding for a while. People sometimes will go quiet for a little while, and you've got to find out why that is. Like you said, could be technical, could be that they're concerned about something because then we're not face to face with them, so we don't really know. Um, some of the actions would be to and ring them personally and find out what's happening if there's anything. Um, when I had my consulting company, and I had consultants out doing projects all over the place. And I don't know whether they still call this now, but there used to be a thing we used to call client capture. Have you heard about that, client capture?
No, no, I haven't.
So what had happened is the consultant would get onto the client site and start to feel like the client rather than feel like you're there from your consulting company, basically. Um, Instead of being a consultant, they become the client. And so they can go quiet. So in this case, I had a senior consultant on a large program, and he was in a regional area, and we were in the city. My office was in Sydney, and he went quiet. So no status reports, which was actually built into his contract, no timesheets, no expenses. These were the first signals that we thought, hello, something's not right here, because all the admin didn't get done. Um, and then I had to ring the client to see what was going on, and they were all happy. Everybody was happy, but he wasn't doing what he needed to do for me and my company. So I had to send someone to go and get him, which we did. We sent someone to go and get him. And after a bit of discussion, we had to make some hard decisions. So I guess what I'm saying is you have to deal with things. And this is what you're saying too, Margaret. We have to deal with things as project managers. And sometimes it means a hard decision.
That's right. And in the case where, the person may be sabotaging the project because of
Yeah.
self-preservation and,
Yeah.
basically delaying the inevitable or trying to railroad the project so that they, don't get made redundant, for example, or that it prolongs the tenure
Yeah.
that they've got. I mean, these are all things, tactics that are it just provides challenges to the project manager
Yeah.
and to be able to get over, each hurdle bit by bit. So, you know, in that instance, I tried to, speak to the person and get them to basically give them an opportunity to manage some of the testing group. And I think from that, I got a good response because then they were able to prove that they were able to do it, and it
Ah,
gave them some
yeah.
it gave them some impetus for them to, show the group, the sponsor, that
Mm,
hey, I'm actually worthy of potentially even getting another job within the
yeah.
company because I've done
Yeah.
a good job here.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. And sometimes we have to be a little bit creative when we're project managers and come up with things that are sometimes outside the square.
That's right.
But but that's what makes it so exciting, I think, project management.
That's right. Because
And
every
and
day
I,
is different.
every day's different. And I should say to people too that you know, we very often as project managers, we very often oh, my slide deck's gone mad. Um, you know, we very often blame ourselves for so many things, but if we take initiative and work through our tool set, our project management tool set, and our technique, there's usually an answer. There's usually a way of getting through things.
That's right. So
Yep. And look,
we,
also for anybody out there that is having difficulties, be it a project manager, a sponsor, or a senior stakeholder, drop me a line at the Project Manager Clinic. The details will be in the description below. Got some fantastic people that are able to help with project manager coaching, specifically and action planning and project optimization. So, Margaret, was there anything that you had to sum up before we wrap this up?
so just going back to the question, how do I manage a hybrid team effectively? We've given
Yeah.
you a few tips on basically dispersed teams and international teams. And will I be judged as a PM for the success or otherwise of my hybrid management ability? Of course, you will be, because it's all part and parcel of managing communication, leadership, stakeholder engagement. It's all included in that. And the
Yeah.
tools that you can harness are the ones that I mentioned: setting an agenda, having a regular cadence, ensuring that you have tools to engage the participants. So it might be polls, it might be QR codes, it might be Q&A, and using that timeanddate.com meeting.com is a great way to be able to schedule people that are dispersed globally.
Well, thanks again, Margaret. I'm really pleased that we've gone through another Ask a Mentor session and we've come up with some responses and some ideas for people to put into practice. It's been great talking to you, and we've had some great feedback. And again, I think we both learnt something because these questions are challenging.
Yes, they are.
Who knows what we're going to have next month?
That's
But
right.
for anybody watching, stay tuned for next month. There'll be something else, Ask a Mentor session. And until then, have a great project day. Thanks, Margaret.
Thank you.